Hi, this is Blair Berg with Double B Homes, and I'm joined by Sarah Church of the Pemberton Home Team. She's going to give us a little information today about hosting a successful open house. Sarah, do you want to fill us in on your background?
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me to do this. I'm excited. So I've been in real estate for 7 years, in the Twin Cities for 3 of them. Started my career in Iowa. I worked as an ISA for a big team in Iowa for the first few years of my career. Moved here and started actually selling real estate. So I went to college for about a year and a half. Wasn't for me. Always knew I wanted to do real estate. So got licensed when I was 19 and never really looked back.
Yeah, that's great. Like I said, I wish I could get money back for my degree
Yeah.
that I got. I never use it now, but no, that's great. So you kind of answered, when did you start? Is there anything that got you really interested in real estate from a young age, or?
Not really. I don't have any realtors in the family. Didn't really know anybody that was in real estate. I just kind of always knew it was what I wanted to do. I'm not exactly sure why, but I just kind of had that vision as a kid and just went for it. Never
Well, that's
looked
great.
back.
Well, it seems like it's worked out for you, so that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
So you said you started out as an ISA. How long did you do that?
About 3.5 years.
Cold calling just
Yeah.
wasn't for you after that, or?
It was just kind of at the point where I felt like I had reached the capacity of like where I wanted to take that. Like it was easy for me. I was good at it. I didn't really feel challenged anymore.
Mhm.
And I liked the idea of actually being in the sales and getting to meet clients and help them through something versus just kind of being the person behind the phone.
For sure. Yeah, and I guess my idea too, if I was going to be an ISA, I might as well go all the way. And actually, if I'm setting the appointments,
Yeah,
go on the appointment
for
in front of the
sure.
house.
And it was
So,
a great way to kind of gain comfortability on the phone
mhm.
and get used to rejection and all the things that young agents really struggle with in the beginning. So I don't think I would be able to be where I'm at today without that like really solid foundation. So I'm super thankful for that experience, but I can definitely say I do like the sales side more.
Yeah, for sure. So ISA for a couple of years. What made you take the jump to being an agent? And did you do that in Iowa or before you came
No,
here?
nope. I just came here and tried it out. So that's why
So,
open houses became my thing because I didn't know anybody when I moved here. And I was like, I have to figure out how to meet people for
mhm.
free and
Yeah,
get
right.
this thing off the ground. So
Because
that
that was going to be my
became
next question. What brought you to Minnesota?
just decided to make a move.
You didn't want to go
Yeah.
somewhere warm?
No, I like the Midwest. I like the seasons, and my family is all still in Iowa. I'm the only
Okay.
one here. So I was like, I still wanted to be close to them within a
Mhm.
car ride. So my hometown's about 3.5 hours away from here.
Oh yeah, my mom's family all still lives in Iowa, so
Oh,
I'm
really?
there plenty.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um. So yeah, you've been doing. Have you always been part of the Pemberton home team, or what was your journey when you got to Minnesota?
No, I started at KW, then went to EXP, then went back to KW, then I'm back at EXP now. So
Really?
I've kind of bopped around a little bit. It was hard for me to find a team dynamic that worked really well for me. But finding PHT was perfect because I came from a really big team in Iowa. And I think it
Hmm.
just kind of took me a little bit of a roundabout way to figure out that that's the style and the structure that I really like, just
Yep.
those large teams.
I started with Keller as well,
Yeah.
and I was on a very small team to
Yep.
begin with, and that definitely wasn't for me.
That's exactly how I felt.
Um.
Nothing against small teams whatsoever. I
Yeah.
think some of it, that works really well for some people, but personally, and probably sounds like you too, we just really like the dynamic of a really large team.
Yeah, and there's just so much, I think, structure in a small team. I think it's really good, especially I think as a new agent that helped me.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people get into it and they think, oh, well, the sales are just going to come to me. Well, it's like you got to spend time in the office.
for
So
sure.
that it does. I'm glad I did it.
Yeah,
But I'm also glad that I'm not doing it anymore.
absolutely. Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
so yeah, I guess we can get right into it.
Yeah,
You're big on open houses. Talk
yeah,
to us a little bit about that.
yeah. So, like I said, when I moved here, I was pretty much like, well, I have to figure out how to meet people and get in front of people because that's really what real estate is.
Mhm.
So, I'm like, what better way to do that than just to dive right into open houses? So, I've pretty much done an open house almost every weekend for probably 2.5 years.
2.5
So,
years.
yeah, it's definitely a labor of love. Sacrificing a lot of time, a lot of weekends. If I had a dollar for every open house I did where nobody showed up, I probably wouldn't need to sell real estate anymore.
That's yeah.
So, it's just one of those things where it's definitely got to be an investment and something that you kind of work on for the long haul.
Mhm.
That's what I always tell people when they're asking questions about getting into open houses. It's not one of those things where you can do a couple of them and expect immediate results from that. It's just truly something I've invested a lot of time and a lot of energy in.
For sure. And I think I'm someone who you just described. I've like done them sporadically. I'm like, they don't work. I'm
Yeah.
done doing them.
Yep.
And that's been one of my big goals this spring is to do them at a more consistent clip. So I think I'm going to partner with my lender on that. And I think you've been a big inspiration to a lot of people in our building just to get out there and start doing open
Oh,
houses.
I
Because
appreciate that.
I do think, yeah, I think when you're new, you do one or two and you don't really know what you're doing and you
Yeah,
do them kind of sloppy and you're like,
for
well, why
sure.
didn't that work? It's like,
Yeah.
well, because you didn't really do anything.
Yeah.
So when you started out, did you have like a mentor that told you anything about open houses or like online materials? How did you really learn about open houses?
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely had a couple mentors in the beginning that kind of helped me get my career off the ground, I would say. Not necessarily anybody that really coached me through exactly how to host an open house.
Mhm.
I think open houses are very each individual agent runs them a little bit differently, kind of
Mhm.
depending on your sales style and how you talk to people and
Yep.
that kind of thing. So it was just a little bit about finding my uniqueness and what really worked for me and how I like to present open houses. So I wouldn't say there's like, if you do these three things, you're going to be successful every time
Mhm.
type situation, but it's just kind of figuring out what's comfortable, what works for you. When you're comfortable and you're confident, people can sense that.
For sure.
And that's what they're attracted to versus you being like really uptight and nervous, but having all the right answers to the questions, they're not going to be attracted to that.
Yeah.
So,
No, and I think that's big as a real estate agent in general.
yeah,
Is people can sense when you're comfortable and you don't come off as salesy. And I
totally.
think anyone who's really big into cold calls will tell you the same thing.
For sure.
Just same with like networking events. If you're comfortable with yourself, I think that goes a long way.
Yeah. I think one thing that a lot of agents do too, especially when they're getting started, is like there's so many different options. Like you just mentioned, cold calling, door knocking, open houses, farming a neighborhood. There's so many things that you can do. And I think a lot of agents almost get like analysis paralysis and just try so many different
Hmm.
things not consistently and then don't find that one thing that works for them.
Hmm.
I guess my best advice that I experienced was like, I don't do cold calling, I don't do door knocking, I don't do those things. I just lean into the one thing I'm good at and
Yeah,
it works really well for me. And I spend all my time doing that instead of kind of pulling myself in different directions for like part of something.
yeah.
So
No, I totally get that. I think very early on in my career, too, I was spreading myself too thin.
yeah,
I was like, oh, that person says that works, that works, that works.
exactly.
So then
And
I'm
you
like, I'll just do a little bit of everything.
totally, you
Yeah.
hear different things from everybody. And that's what I always tell people, like try different things
Hmm.
and whatever you feel most comfortable and confident in, do that times 100.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of going back to just open houses, walk us through your process. I mean, does this start days before? Kind of walk
Yeah.
us through what you do to prepare.
Yeah, so usually in the week, I would say Tuesday or Wednesday is kind of when I nail down which ones I'm going to do.
Hmm.
Um, I personally like to choose locations that I know well and price points
Hmm.
that are going to get more activity. I think if you're doing, you kind of have to be strategic on which open houses you're doing. Because if you're
Yep.
doing a $2 million listing in Orono, right, that activity is going to be very different than a 350 in Northeast.
For sure.
So just kind of figuring out like what's your ideal clientele, who do you connect with the best, and then kind of picking a price point and location that aligns with that
Yeah.
is really beneficial. So I start with that. Do research on the house, just look at the supplements, look at the listing, kind of just familiarize yourself with when it last sold and what's on the disclosure and just all the kinds of things you would really do to prep for a showing. Because
Hmm.
most of the time it's not my listing.
Yeah.
I'm much more buyer heavy than I am listing heavy at this time. And so I'm typically doing other people's open houses. And so, just familiarizing yourself with the listing and if I have enough time or if it's close by, I'll preview it, but otherwise I'll just show up early and just, know the kind of most obvious questions people are going to ask you when they walk into the house.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Do you spend any time the day of, like before or a couple days before, door knocking or anything?
The one thing that I do sometimes is I'll invite the neighbors for a neighbor only like 30 minutes earlier. But other than that, not really.
Okay.
Like I'll just say, hey, I'm having, your neighbor's selling their house. And if you want to come by 30 minutes before the open house starts for an exclusive neighbor sneak peek, then you
Yeah.
can. But that's about all I've done. That works really well because the neighbors feel really important and
Yeah.
valued. Yeah.
I'm sure it's a great way to kind of farm some listings too,
Yeah.
because they're like, well, she obviously cares about the neighborhood.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, so that sounds good. Are you the kind of agent, are you like providing refreshments at these things or?
Yeah, that's not anything I've really ever done. I would say my setup is kind of I have music going, I've got a candle going, I've got my iPad out, and I'm just kind of posted up at the front door, just waiting for people to come in. So down the road, maybe, but it's just never been anything that I'm I'm doing a lot in a weekend. So like
Mhm.
grabbing donuts before each one or something like
Yeah.
that just isn't really doable. Like I'm doing 2 to 4 every weekend. So
Yeah, and if it's not broke, don't fix it.
right,
So,
exactly.
if it works
Exactly.
for you.
Yeah.
So, and then are you doing these all solo? Do you bring a lender? Do you bring like a closing agent or anything? Or is it just you out
It's
there?
just me. Yeah, I do it solo. I've never done one with a lender before.
Neither have I, and it's going to be something like I said, I'm testing
Yeah.
out this
I think
spring.
it's a good thing to do, especially if you're concerned about safety for whatever reason or if there's anything that you're like want an extra body there with
Yeah.
you. But yeah, I guess I've never tried that, but
See, and the kind of angle I'm hoping to come from is like one of, I'm not the biggest numbers guy, but especially in this market where like
yeah.
what is happening with interest rates, I got a guy
Yeah.
there that can tell you about it.
Yeah, for sure.
So that sounds good. So walk us through. It's 10 a.m. Your open house is starting. Your people are showing up. What do you have? Kind of like a script that you go through, or do you just kind of wing it?
Yeah, it very much depends on the person. So
Hmm.
I do like mirror matching a lot. So if
Okay.
somebody comes in and they're super talkative, I'll be super talkative. If they come in and I can tell they're really standoffish, I'll just let them be.
Hmm.
I think you kind of have to really read the room and see. I think that's why I have a lot of people that do feel comfortable giving me their information after they've walked through the house because I do take a very personalized approach
Okay.
depending on who comes in.
Hmm.
I think that's where a lot of agents kind of mess up a little bit is because they are talking the same exact way to every single person.
Yeah.
So you're going to attract some people really well that are into that and then
Hmm.
other people that are not, they're going to be like totally turned off by your approach. So,
Yeah.
just being really careful with mirror matching, being like responsive to the type of people that want to talk to you and recognizing when they don't and just kind of going from there.
Well, yeah, and I think that's really reflective, like we talk about, of any lead generation tool. If you're too
Yeah,
scripty, people know.
totally.
And no one wants to talk to someone who's pitching you a script.
For
So that
sure.
does make sense.
Yeah.
Then do you do like a sign-in sheet? Have
I
you
have my
switched over like a
iPad.
QR code? Okay,
I
so
haven't
iPad.
switched over to a QR code. I use Open Home Pro for sign-ins.
Okay.
I really like that app. You can put a picture of the house on the background, and then it sends you an email at the end of the day with all the sign-ins that you got,
Okay.
and it attaches what address they were. So if you're prospecting your open house leads from a
Mm-hmm.
year later, you can be like, "Hey, I met you at 123 Main Street in August of 2022," and they're like, "Oh wow, she remembered that."
And does that sync with your CRM?
It does not.
Okay.
I
But I'm sure
don't
it's an easy
think.
import
Yeah,
if you
super
wanted
easy.
to.
Super easy. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And then so open house is over. What does your follow-up process look like?
I send a video to everybody same
Okay.
day and
Okay.
just say, "Hey, it was so nice to meet you. Thank you for coming by. I really enjoyed talking with you. I'm excited to stay in touch. Have a great rest of your Sunday."
Mhm.
Nothing about real estate, just simply it was nice to meet you and here's my cell phone number.
Okay.
And then I tell them to save my number in the video so that when I text them the next day, kind of following up with a real estate related follow up, they already have my number saved. They've already gotten a text message from me. It just feels really cohesive.
Okay. Yeah, no, that sounds great. And then do you have like it sounds like a same day, a next day? Is there like a week, a
Yeah, it
month
depends on
out?
where they're at, right? So if somebody's like, "Hey, we're pre-approved and we're like ready to go," obviously it's not going to be like a 2-week follow-up. But if somebody's telling me we're just getting started, our
Hmm.
lease isn't up for 6 months, that's not going to be a super aggressive follow-up. So
Yeah.
it just kind of is having a conversation with the people about where they're at and what type of follow-up they need is really important because
Yeah.
you can really sabotage something if you're being way too aggressive with somebody that's like, "We're not even going to start looking for 8 more months."
Yeah, for sure. Um, I know open house agents love, like, do you do handwritten cards? That seems to be a big one.
I do handwritten cards like post closing, but not
Yeah.
to people that I've just walked through because I don't know like how I would get their address.
Well, that's what I always,
Yeah.
because I have so many agents like, oh, I send handwritten cards to everyone after. It's like, well, how do you
How do
know
you
where they
get their
live
address?
currently?
Yeah, no, I'm like people are hardly giving their phone number and they're not
I
going
was
to
gonna,
tell me where they
I
live.
was gonna say you have a very detailed sign-in sheet if you have somewhere to send
Yeah, totally.
a thank
I
you
would be
card to.
interested to hear how people do that because I mean, it's like getting someone's phone number and email is hard enough. They're not going to be like, "Here's where I live."
Exactly. Yeah.
That's funny.
People are pretty much like, oh, I don't even own a cell phone.
Yeah,
Sorry.
seriously,
So,
exactly. Yeah.
is there anything else that we like didn't cover about open houses that you would want like a new agent starting doing open houses to know?
I guess the biggest thing is just give it some time,
Mhm.
just kind of like we talked about in the beginning. And you have to remember that this is people are looking at open houses oftentimes far before they're really ready to go,
Hmm.
because this is the one way that they can get inside houses without a real estate agent.
Hmm.
And so you just have to remember that. And when somebody is 8 months out and you've got to nurture that lead for a really long time, you've got to be willing to do that, because this is not the type of lead gen where it's going to be a very quick sale.
For sure. Yeah, and I think people forget that about lead gen in general.
They do, yeah. And it's our industry, and typical salespeople are very like, we want it now.
Yeah.
And the follow up is challenging. And
Hmm.
so I think just setting the expectation of this is not something that's going to equal a paycheck in a month.
Hmm.
You have to kind of put in the work.
So, with us living in Minnesota, do you find at all that open houses are kind of seasonal success wise, or do you see as many in the winter as you do like in the spring, summer?
I would say I see as many people come through in the winter as spring and summer. We've been in a low inventory market for a while, so if you're doing the right open houses, you're going to be busy no matter which season we're in.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds great. And then I guess what percentage would you say your business is open house?
So 68% last year was closed from open house.
68.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. I mean, it also sounds like you keep good record of like ROI where your returns are coming
Yeah.
from when it comes to lead gen. So that's awesome.
Yeah. I don't have a ton of lead gen sources, and that's on purpose. So I'm just leaning in heavily to like past clients, open houses, sphere.
For sure.
So then that's easier to kind of keep track of all that ROI, because it's not, I'm not
Yeah.
paying for a bunch of different things all over the place and have to figure it out.
And like we said earlier, not spreading yourself too thin.
Exactly.
All right. Well, unless there's anything else you think that we didn't cover, I think that about wraps it up.
Yeah, I think that was great.
All right. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah,
Sarah.
thanks.